Shalom. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabashi, Bahashem, Rachakodash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I learned this truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabashi. Yahweh is the true name of the God of Israel. Yahabashi is who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one and only true name is Yahabashi. And pretty much I'm still continuing on this series of going into the different men of the Lord that has supernatural abilities, aka spiritual power. Now, why is this important? Because the scripture said what? In Romans 15:4, the things written aforetime is written for our learning, in order to what? Increase our hope, which hope is synonymous with faith. So part of the promises of the new covenant through Yahweh's blood sacrifice and resurrection is immortality and supernatural strength, all right, aka spiritual power. We're going to have the power of an actual angel with still having the power to reproduce. That's why here at Great Millstone, we use words like extraterrestrial, so you can understand. Because under that new covenant, we all going to be having sex, because the Lord, that's one of the commandments: be fruitful and multiply, all right? And that's how we're going to bring back 2/3 of the nation of Israel that's prophesied to be destroyed pursuant to Zechariah 13:8 in America. So let's get into Samson, because when you read about the different supernatural abilities that men of the Lord had, we're going to get these same abilities and greater, all right? So let's deal with Samson. So I typed in on Google, and this is a lesson I had prepared since last week. Samson's supernatural strength. Samson's supernatural strength, as described in the biblical book of Judges, did not come from bulging muscles, but from the Holy Spirit. Exactly. It says, handpicked as a Nazarite, his uncut hair symbolized his lifelong obedience to Yahweh. When the Spirit empowered him, he performed superhuman feats. And this ain't magic. This is not fiction. This is not grown men, with kid mindsets. Men of the Lord really did this in real time. They really did this. All right. The power of Yahweh, right? Bahashem Yahabashi, whether you read the Old or New Testament, it manifested in these men. Why? Because of their faith. How they was consecrated to the Most High, right? His most notable acts of power include tearing a lion. He killed He killed an attacking lion with his bare hands. How many of us could do that today? Even the biggest, strongest brothers in the camp, which I'm not going to say they can't do it though, right? Because they believe on Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. So when you read Luke 1:37, nothing is impossible with Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, all right? But just realistically speaking, outside of the truth, that's a better example. Outside of the truth, the biggest bodybuilder the biggest guy that with massive muscles, he can't tear an attacking lion with that type of bite pressure and power. You can't defeat no damn lion. A lion will fuck you up. A lion will eat you alive, all right? These men was able to do this because they were faithful servants to Yahweh and Yahabashi, depending on when you read the Old and New Testament. So he was able, through the power of Yahweh, to kill an attacking lion. That's strong as hell, right? Breaking ropes. He snapped thick new ropes, binding his arms as if they were threads. The donkey jawbone. This is the one that everybody know, right? It says he struck down 1,000 Philistines, because remember, the Philistines, they was like our arch rivals because they was on our border, right? It says 1,000 Philistine warriors using only the jawbone of an ass or a donkey, all right? Sometimes you read the scriptures and it has like the word like ass or something, which is referring to a donkey, all right? Don't be ignorant. It says city gates. He uprooted the heavy city gates of Gaza, post, bar, and all, and carried them to the top of a nearby hill. Temple destruction. After losing his hair and his strength, he repented, and Yahweh granted him the power to push apart the main pillars of the Philistine temple, destroying the building and its captors, right? Which he ended up killing everybody in there. And if I'm not mistaken, he himself died, all right? Now, we're going to start getting into some scriptures. So this is what else I typed in, leading into me getting into some scriptures. Samson's supernatural Bible verses. Samson's supernatural strength is detailed in the book of Judges 13 through 16, which, by the way, the book of Ruth, for all you ignorant, dumbass people out here that think Ruth was an Israelite because, oh, it's called the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth is a continuation of the book of Judges. It's just that simple. Continuing on. It's a continuation of the book of Judges, the book of Ruth. All right? She's not no fucking Israelite. She's a Moabite. The scriptures clearly tell you that. She identified herself as that. It says, his power wasn't magical. It came directly from the Holy Spirit, connected to his Nazarite vow, aka his faith, which included never cutting his hair. It says, here are the key Bible verses detailing his extraordinary feats and the source of his power, the source of the Spirit's power. Judges 10 and 5, right? Which, let me get that. Let me read it myself. Judges 10 and 5. Is it 10 and 5 or 13 and 5? 13 and 5, excuse me. Judges 13 and 5. Okay, my connection is good today. So it's dealing with Philistines oppressor again, right? Now we're going to read this in the NLT version. I like it better. NLT version. The birth of Samson, right? Judges 13 and 1. Again, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. Because when you read in the book of Judges, the Israelites had a record of just constantly sinning before the Lord. They would get delivered by the hand of a particular judge, which came out of the seed of Israel, that would deliver them through the power and will of Yahweh. Then the people, they would repent, things would be good. Then they go right back to following the way of the heathen, all right? Then that particular judge, he would die after a while. Then the Lord would have to raise up another judge. And we just kept going into captivity under these different nations, all right? So like I said, the book of Ruth is a continuation of the book of Judges. And I got a video lined up. But continuing on. It says, again, the Israelites did evil in Yahweh's sight. The word Lord is in caps, so it's Strong's H3060. I know about heart because that's the name of the Lord. All right? Yahweh's sight. So Yahweh handed them over to the Philistines. When these heathen nations took us down, you know, they besieged us, you know, they took over our land. They didn't do that because they're so powerful and strong. They did that because we sinned against the Lord, so Yahweh delivered us into their hands. All right? It's not about who's bigger and stronger. It's all about what is the will of Yahweh. What did he sanction? What did he predestinate? It says, so Yahweh handed them over to the Philistines, who oppressed them for 42 years. So we was in captivity under the Philistines for 42 years, right? It says, in those days, a man named Manoah from the tribe of Dan lived in the town of Zorah, right? Now, quick mention of the tribe of Dan. They're not mentioned in Revelation, the 7th chapter, all right? Because they fell as a tribe. When you read Amos 8 and 14, and you can also read in the book of 1 Kings, the 12th chapter, about the sin of Samaria, which goes back to Dan setting up them golden calves in the land. So Dan was the first tribe to what? Commit idolatry. That's why they fell as a tribe. So they're irrelevant, all right? They're irrelevant. We'll know what happened to them ultimately in the kingdom, but we need to just focus on the scriptures. Continuing on. Because a lot of you people, a lot of you Israelites, you like to worry about things that's above your understanding and things that are irrelevant, all right? Continuing on. It says, lived in the town of Zorah. His wife was unable to become pregnant, meaning she was barren, and they had no children. The angel of Yahweh appeared to Manoah's wife and said, even though you have been unable to have children, meaning she was barren, when you read in the King's Old English, you will soon become pregnant and give birth to a son. So be careful. So you see the power of Yahweh. You could be dealing with a woman that is barren, or a woman that's really old and then she gives birth, like Sarah, right? Continuing on, it says, yep. It says, I'm going to read again from the top. Lost my train of thought. Judges 13:13 NLT. The angel of Yahweh appeared to Manoah's wife and said, even though you have been unable to have children, you will soon become pregnant and give birth to a son. So be careful. You must not drink wine or any other alcoholic drink, nor eat any forbidden food. You will become pregnant and give birth to a son. See how this is predestination? It says, and his hair must never be cut, for he will be dedicated or consecrated to Yahweh as a Nazirite from birth. He will begin to rescue Israel from the Philistines. It says, all right, so that's pretty much the point, all right? And then she goes into, you know, the angels' appearance. Because the angels, when they materialize as so-called Negro-looking men, all right, they don't look friendly. You know, they don't look friendly. They're not smiling. They're not, you know, floating around like Cupid, so-called angels and stuff like that, which that doesn't exist, by the way. That goes back to that pagan shit that the Romans was doing with Saint Valentine and all that bullshit. All right? The angels are fierce warriors, and they're our brothers. So now, let's go back to this right here. All right? And then another thing they got, Judges 13:25. Okay. So let's go back. Let me skip on down. Okay. Judges 13, and I start at 24. It says, when her son was born, she named him Samson, right? Or YASHAMIAHLA. It says, and Yahweh blessed him as he grew up, right? And the spirit of Yahweh began to stir him while he lived in Mahanidan, which is located between the towns of Zorah and Ashtiel. Let me just go to the next chapter and see if it's going to say something else. Okay, you know, it's pretty much going into that account. I want the account of power. That's what I'm looking for. So let's deal with this. The lion at Timnah. Oh, see, that's the spirit. So let me keep it going. Continuing on. It says Samson's riddle. Judges 14:1. One day when Samson was in Timnah, one of the Philistine women caught his eye, right? Because the heathen nations, they got some pretty ass women too. You know, I have my fair share. Continuing on though. It says, when he returned home, he told his father and mother, a young Philistine woman, right, Hamite, in Timnah caught my eye. I want to marry her, get her for me. His father and mother objected. Isn't there even one woman in our tribe or among all the Israelites you can marry? See? So it wasn't just you can only deal with women in your tribes. You could deal with the other tribes too. You know, for you brothers out there, you don't just got to deal with, you know, so-called American Negro women or so-called West Indian women or so-called Haitian women only, you know, Negro-looking women. You can deal with the other tribes. Like me, myself, I love the tribe of ASHUR. That's my thing, all right? That's what I mess with. That's what I've been messing with pretty much for the past, like, couple of years. But that's my thing. You may be a brother, you into so-called African-American woman, you know, so-called Haitian, Jamaican, Trinidad, whatever, Belize, whatever. Everybody got their thing, all right? But you could deal with heathen woman on the side. It's just that they can't receive salvation. But you never know. She could be an Israelite or Jake, right? But anyways, back to the story. It says, so this is the parents. The parents is like, damn, you want to deal with a damn Philistine? Just deal with one of our people, right? See, this is racism. Now I'm joking. Judges 14:3. His father and mother objected. Isn't there even one woman in our tribe or among all the Israelites you can marry? They asked. Why must you go to the pagan Philistines to find a wife? You see that? They don't want their son fucking with no nasty ass heathen. All right? Deal with royalty. It says, but Samson told his father, get her for me. So Samson really wanted to, you know what, that woman, right? She looks good to me. Sometimes it's like that. Woman looks so good, she catch your eye, something different about her. There's something that you ain't never had before. You gotta have it, you know? Verse 4, Judges 14:4, that's the spirit, Lord willing. His father and mother didn't realize Yahweh was at work in this, creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines, who ruled over Israel at the time. As Samson and his parents were going down to Timnah, a young lion suddenly attacked Samson near the vineyards of Timnah, right? So this is the account of a lion. And keep in mind, lions is ferocious, man. They got a lot of bite power, a lot of bite pressure. I forget what they call it. I think it's like PSI, something like that. But lions are powerful, man. Them damn fangs, them heavy ass paws, that's a battle. A lion come after you, unless Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh is with you, ain't no way you surviving. People could barely outrun a lion being in like a Jeep Wrangler or something. But continuing on, it says verse 6, at that moment, the spirit of Yahweh came powerfully upon him, Samson, and he ripped the lion's jaws apart with his bare hands. What bodybuilder, because I got to use them, because they the strongest example I can use. All the protein powder that they take, as big as they are, strict diet, some of them dirty bulk, whatever, right? Which one of them niggas could kill and attack a lion as strong as they are? None. None of them could do that shit unless Yahweh Bashim AHSHAWAR was with them. All right? I'm going to read it again because I'm getting amped up now. Judges 14:6. At that moment, the spirit of Yahweh, because my father, he always taught me this. You know, it's not the size of the lion. It's the fight in the lion. All right? Really, it just comes down to your faith. Just because somebody bigger, that don't mean shit. A lot of big ass dudes get fucked up by little dudes. But anyways, Judges 14:6, at that moment, the spirit of Yahweh came powerfully upon him, and he ripped the lion's jaws apart. Look at that. An attacking lion with all that bite pressure, he grabbed that shit, and what did he do to it? He ripped the lion's jaws apart with his bare hands. Come on, man. When Yahweh is with you, nothing could defeat you. It says he did it as easily as if it were a young goat. But he didn't tell his father or mother about it. See, certain spiritual things that men go through, you know, everybody don't gotta know everything. That's just between you and Yahweh and Yahweh. All right? Even certain dreams. Every dream don't gotta be a video. Every dream ain't a vision. Certain things is just between you and the Most High and Yahweh. But continuing on, it says, when Samson arrived in Timnah, he talked with the woman and was very pleased with her. All right? So now, let's go back now. So now it's dealing with defeating the Philistine army. Let's get this account. Judges 15, that's the next chapter. Let's go there, NLT, keeping it going. So, let's start up. Yeah, Samson's vengeance on the Philistines. We're going to start at verse 1. The point is on down at about 15 or 16 verse. Judges 15:1. Later on during the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat as a present to his wife. He said, I'm going into my wife's room to sleep with her, right, to have sex. But her father wouldn't let him in. I truly thought you must hate her, her father explained. So I gave her in marriage to your best man. Damn. But look, her younger sister is even more beautiful than she is. Marry her instead. Samson said, this time I cannot be blamed for everything I am going to do to you Philistines. So you got to imagine that shit, man. Like we just read a little bit in the chapters above. Samson really wanted this woman, all right? He was going to sleep thinking about this woman. He couldn't take his mind off of this woman. And then next thing you know, the father's like, look, I thought you hated her. You know, I gave her to somebody else to marry. So let's see what's going to happen next now. NLT, Judges 15:4. It says, then he went out and caught 300 foxes. He tied their tails together in pairs, and he fastened a torch to each pair of tails, 300 foxes. Then he lit the torches and let the foxes run through the grain fields of the Philistines. So you got to understand, Samson, he was fucking pissed off And this is how the Lord is stirring up a judge to take down the Philistines as well. Got to build that anger up, right? Remember what it said in Ezekiel, the 25th chapter, verses 12 through 14, which is a future prophecy that's going to take place when New Jerusalem come down, all right? It said that the anger of Yahweh is going to be in us. You know how much power and testosterone that's going to be? We're going to really fuck these Edomites up, and we're going to have a reason to do it. Based off our past lives, we're going to be put back a remembrance of that, all right? Things that we're witnessing in this lifetime. Brothers is pissed the fuck off, and they worn out. Like myself, I'm worn out. The apostles more worn out than me. But continuing on. Judges 15:5, continuing on. He burned all their grain to the ground, including the sheaves and the uncut grain. He also destroyed their vineyards and olive groves. Who did this? The Philistines demanded. Samson was the reply, because his father-in-law from Timnah gave Samson's wife to be married to his best man. It says, so the Philistines went and got the woman and her father and burned them to death. It says, because you did this, Samson vowed, I won't rest until I take revenge on you. So he pissed, man. You know, he wanted that woman. I know that feeling. So he attacked the Philistines with great fury and killed many of them. See, this is how the Lord was stirring them up, was preparing them to take them down, right? Sometimes it take a bit of experience like that to activate that anger like that. Then he went to live in a cave in the rock of Ephraim. The Philistines retaliated by setting up camp in Judah, which is on our border, and spreading out near town of Lehi, right? But they wasn't on the border. They had us in captivity for 42 years. All right, so they was actually in our land controlling us because they had us in captivity at this time. So that's a correction. Verse 10, the men of Judah asked the Philistines, why are you attacking us? The Philistines replied, we've come to capture Samson. We've come to pay him back for what he did to us. So 3,000 men of Judah went down to get Samson at the cave in the rock of Ephraim. They said to Samson, don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? What are you doing to us? But Samson replied, I only did to them what they did to me. But the men of Judah told him, we have come to tie you up and hang you over to the Philistines. So these dudes were scared. All right. They were scared. They didn't want to fight. They was in a defeated mindset. They didn't want to rise up. Right. That's why the Lord be having a lot of bitter shit happen to the tribe of Judah, which is my tribe. Because Judah don't be wanting to rise up. Judah be fucking scared. Continuing on. It says, all right, Samson said. It says, but promise that you won't kill yourselves. It says, we will only tie you up and hang you over to the Philistines. They replied, we won't kill you. So they tied him up with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. As Samson arrived at Lehi, the Philistines came shouting in triumph. But the spirit of Yahweh came powerfully upon Samson. Now notice whenever Samson is about to get spiritual power, aka supernatural strength and abilities to defeat his enemies, right? Notice how it says that the power of Yahweh comes on him powerfully. It says, and he snapped the ropes of his arms as if they were burnt strands of flax, and they fell from his wrists because he was bounded up. You got to imagine how tight that is on the skin. He just broke that shit like it's nothing. It says, then he found the jawbone of a recently killed donkey. He picked it up and killed 1,000 Philistines with it by himself. That's what a man of the Lord can do when Yahweh, and in this lifetime, by Hashem Yahweh through the Holy Spirit is with them. You're not supposed to fear your enemies, especially not no damn heathens. All right? It don't matter how small you are. It don't even matter if you got infirmities. If the Most High give you the power or he command you to do something, you better do that shit with no doubt. Continuing on. Then Samson said with the jawbone of a donkey, I've piled them in heaps. You got to imagine like the type of adrenaline rush, like, you know? It says, I've piled them in heaps with the jawbone of a donkey. I've killed 1,000 men. When he finished his boasting, he threw away the jawbone And the place was named Jawbone Hill, because that's where he killed 1,000 Philistines, right? So that's it with that. That was fun to read. Let's go down here. Okay, the gates of Gaza. So we may have to, we might have to read the whole chapter, because that's going to be it. So let's go to the next one. NLT version, next chapter. You got to get into these scriptures, man. You know, yeah, we always going to look at current events and link it up with prophecy, but, you know, me as a young brother, I'm falling more in love with the scriptures. All right, that's why I like to do these type of lessons, to sharpen my understanding. NLT version, Judges 16:1. Now, this is dealing with Samson carries away Gaza's gates, right? I got to start at verse 1. Let me see how long the chapter is, though. Okay, they got his victory. Okay. So this is what it's dealing with. Let me see if I want to read the whole thing now. Yeah, I got to read the whole thing. Anyway, Judges 16:1. It says, one day Samson went to the Philistine town of Gaza and spent the night with a prostitute. This is another thing that men of the Lord did. Men of the Lord slept with prostitutes. You know, you used to have ignorant ass people that used to be a part of our camp, and just people that defected, people that scoff and mock us. Oh my God, you guys pay for prostitutes. Your woman is a prostitute. The woman you had kids with, that you commit adultery with, all right? Which all of us commit adultery, not willingly, but we're not dealing with virgins. We lost that custom. We're not sovereign and independent, so we can't keep particular customs like this because it's outlawed worldwide. You'll be looked at as, you know, a pedo or whatever, all right? So we all technically committing adultery. That's part of the reason why Yahweh had to die for us. That's why we under grace, to where we're not held to that old covenant standard, all right? But continuing on. So men of the Lord slept with prostitutes, man. Back then and in this lifetime too. I don't care how you feel about it. Judges 16:2 NLT. Word soon spread that Samson was there. It says, so the men of Gaza gathered together and waited all night at the town gates. They kept quiet during the night, saying to themselves, when the light of morning comes, we will kill him. It says, but Samson stayed in bed only until midnight. Then he got up, took hold of the doors of the town gate, including the 2 posts, and lifted them up, bar and all. He put them on his shoulders and carried them all the way to the top of the hill across from Hebron. Now it's getting into what? Samson and Delilah, right? So Judges 16:4. It says, sometime later, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah. So this is letting you know that what? Yeah, he wanted to marry that other woman, but she was already given in marriage already. And then he fell in love with another woman. Women are replaceable, man. There's more than one beautiful woman in the world. It says, sometime later, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah, who lived in the valley of Sorek. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, entice Samson. It's just like today, right? If you want to, they call it in this lifetime backdooring somebody. You want to set somebody up. You know, they use a woman to do it. Pretty ass woman, right? Your weakness, pretty much. Because a pretty ass woman gonna make you put your guard down, right? Now, right when you're vulnerable, that's when you're gonna lose. It says, entice Samson to tell you what makes him so strong and how he can be overpowered and tied up securely. Which, I mean, that's a crazy fucking question to ask somebody. All right? If I had a woman ask me some shit like that, I'm out. I'm not gonna tell her I'm out. I'm just gonna look at her crazy, but I'm out though. I got something to do. Something came up. I gotta go to a wake, or I gotta go to the hospital or something. But continuing on, it says, then each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. It says, so Delilah said to Samson, please tell me what makes you so strong and what it will take to tie you up securely. It says, Samson replied, if I were tied up with 7 new bowstrings that have not yet been dried, I will become as weak as anyone else. So the Philistine rulers brought Delilah 7 new bowstrings, and she tied Samson up with them. She had hidden some men in one of the inner rooms of our house, and she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. That's crazy. You see how women are? How they could play shit off, act like they ain't do nothing? You gotta be careful with women, man. A woman will set you up and have you in a fucked up position. Continuing on, I'm speaking through experience. I'm not speaking through somebody else's experience. It says, but Samson snapped the bowstrings as a piece of string snaps when it is burnt by fire. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Because you don't tell a woman everything about yourself. All right? She don't need to know every fucking thing about you. Every little damn secret you got. You got to keep some shit a secret. Read on Micah 7:5. It says, afterward, Delilah said to him, you've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now, please tell me how you could be tied up securely. Samson replied, if I were tied up with brand new ropes that had never been used, I would become as weak as anyone else. So Delilah took, now notice what this bitch is doing, right? Notice how, like, she's making it clear, like she's trying to like set him up and get him bound. But continuing on, it says, so Delilah took new ropes and tied him up with them. The men were hiding in the inner room as before. And again, Delilah cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. Come on, 2 times? Nah. But again, Samson snapped the ropes from his arms as if they were thread, because Yahweh is with him. It says, then Delilah said, you've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now tell me how you can be tied up securely. Samson replied, now this is a real answer, but let's keep it going. If you were to weave the 7 braids, all right, for you stupid ass people out here that think that he had dreadlocks, he had braids, all right, 7 locks, braids, plaited hair. It says, if you were to weave the 7 braids, NLT version, dumbass people, dreadlocks is a heathen custom that goes back to something that the worshippers of Shiva had. Continuing on, dreadlocks is not a part of our culture as Israelites, so-called Negroes, Hispanics, the different Indian tribes of the Caribbean, South Central, North America, Canada. That's not our damn custom. You got these particular camps, they be having people wearing dreadlocks, reading the Bible. That person is not in the truth, man. They not no priests of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. Continuing on. If you were to weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on your loom and tighten it with the loom shuttle, I will become as weak as anyone else. So while he slept, man, you gotta watch out too. Even though this is a different account, but you gotta watch out who you tell things to and who you give your location to, who you let in your house. You gotta like vet women, man, because it's even worse now. It says, yep, so while he slept, Delilah wove the 7 braids of his hair into the fabric. Then she tightened it with the loom shuttle. Again, she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. But Samson woke up, pulled back the loom shuttle, and yanked his hair away from the loom and the fabric. Then Delilah pouted, how can you tell me I love you? You see how a woman is? How she try to weaponize her emotions against you to get what she wants? All she thinking about is the money. All she thinking about is that 1,100 pieces of silver. She don't give a fuck about Samson. She love mammon. But continuing on. It says, when you don't share your secrets with me, you've made fun of me 3 times now, and you still haven't told me what makes you so strong. She tormented him with her nagging day after day until he was sick of death of it. That's what a woman will do. A woman will nag like a little fucking kid until she get what she want, pretty much, right? It says, finally, Samson shared his secret with her after the 3rd time, right? It says, my hair has never been cut, he confessed, for I was dedicated to Yahweh as a Nazarite from birth. And you could tell he really loved this woman because he actually told her, right? If my hair If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as anyone else. Delilah realized he had finally told her the truth, so she sent for the Philistine rulers. Come back one more time, she said, for he has finally told me his secret. So the Philistine rulers returned with the money in their hands. Delilah lulled Samson to sleep with his head in her lap, and she called in a man to shave off the 7 locks. Verse 13 NLT, it said braids, it didn't say dreadlocks. 7 locks of his hair. In this way, she began to bring him down, and his strength left him, because the Nazarite vow is broken now. All right. Then she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. When he woke up, he thought, I would do as before and shake myself free, but he didn't realize Yahweh had left him, because the vow is broken. He was told not to do that. But continuing on, it says, so the Philistine captured him and gouged out his eyes. They took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains and forced to grind grain in the prison. But before long, his hair began to grow back. Now it's dealing with what? Samson's final victory. It says the Philistine rulers held a great festival, offering sacrifices and praising their god Dagon. They said, our God has given us victory over our enemy. So it's opposite for the heathen. All right. The heathens, they worship wood and stone, idolatry. They commit fornication. They worship the creation instead of the creator himself. Us as the Israelites, we have the privilege of worshiping the true and living God, which his name is Yahweh, the one above all. And then on his right hand, number 2, who we supposed to worship, our Messiah, our heavenly high priest, our mediator, our savior, our everything, Yahweh. We supposed to worship them both. All right. Continuing on, they're living. Dagon is not a living entity. It says, they said, our God, it's the Philistines, right? Chanting, everybody having a festival, partying, like, yeah, we finally got this motherfucker, right? We finally got him. They said, our God has given us victory over our enemy Samson. When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, our God has delivered our enemy to us. The one who killed so many of us is now in our power. You know, they talking all loud and shit. Half drunk by now, the people demanded, bring out Samson so he can amuse us. So he was brought from the prison to amuse them. Keep in mind, his eyes is gouged out. And they had him stand between the pillars supporting the roof. This is where they setting themselves up to die. All right, this is where he gonna display for the last time his supernatural strength. It says, Samson said to the young servant who was leading him by the hand, place my hands against the pillars that hold up the temple. I want to rest against them. See? Jake always looking for a way to supplant, man. Jake always gonna look for a way to overcome. But you can only do that through Yahweh and Yahweh, through your faith, right? It says, now the temple was completely filled with people. Remember, they have drunk, their guard is down, right? Everybody's in a party, festival spirit, cheering, celebrating, right? Their guard is down, they're vulnerable. All the Philistine rulers were there. And there were about 3,000 men. Remember, this is the book of Judges, all right? The Most High predestined everything to happen the way how it's happening for this moment right here we about to read. It says, and there were about 3,000 men and women on the roof who were watching as Samson amused them, right? Praying their fake-ass God, right? Then Samson prayed to Yahweh, sovereign Yahweh, remember me again. Oh, Yahweh, please strengthen me just one more time. With one blow, let me pay back the Philistines for the loss of my 2 eyes. Then Samson put his hands on the 2 center pillars that held up the temple, pushing against them with both hands. This is the real Hercules right here. He prayed, let me die with the Philistines. And the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he had during his entire lifetime. Later, his brothers and other relatives went down to get his body, They took him back home and buried him between Zorah and Ashtaol, where his father Manoah was buried. Samson had judged Israel for 20 years. He delivered his people. He lived up to being a Shapatya, or being a judge. All right, Shapat, judge. So, yeah, man, that's it. You know, that's the end of the story. The Most High, he gave Samson supernatural strength according to his will, ultimately to defeat the Philistines, to deliver his people out of the hand of bondage. All right, but the point is, we're going to get this power underneath that new covenant when Yahweh Shai comes back and deliver us. Shalom.